All right, guys, how we doing? My name is Chef Justin Midkiff, and today I wanted to talk to everybody a little bit about your higher-end grilling steaks. These are all steaks that you can find at your butcher shop. What I really want to do is be able to tell you the difference between what some of these steaks' characteristics are and how to treat them so you can get the best result at home. So what we have here today is 4 different cuts of the higher ends, not super high end, but your grocer steaks. So here what we have is a ribeye steak. This is a New York strip steak. Here we have a filet mignon, and here what we have is a T-bone. So what we're going to do is talk about the difference in these steaks. We're going to start with the ribeye. The ribeye here is actually my favorite steak of all the steaks. This is the one that, given the choice, when I'm eating at home, this is the steak I decide to grill up. I did select this with bone in. The reason that we left the bone in is because the marrow in the bone will actually help to keep the meat around the bone nice and juicy throughout the grilling process. Now, the nice thing is what we're talking about here again is a ribeye steak. Now, of these 4 steaks, the ribeye steak is the one that has the most marbling and fat content throughout. Now, when we talk about beef and steaks and things like that, fat is really where your flavor comes from. So good marbling is exactly what you're looking for. So in this steak here, you can see, we have nice marbling. Here you have, obviously some of your muscle runs, but you have some good marbling within this ribeye, okay? And again, this is the bone. So this is my favorite one here. Beefiest flavor, pretty forgiving. It will spark up a lot on the grill, but we'll get into that a little bit later. Secondly, what we have here is a New York strip steak. Now, I think a New York strip steak is kind of one of the best bang for your buck steaks. Reason being, you don't have to buy a 14-ounce steak, much like you often have to in a T-bone, because of the bone and things like that, to get a good amount of steak. It has nice marbling, not quite as much as a ribeye, but it's also not lean like the filet mignon. So it's got good marbling on it, super forgiving. This is a great way, I think, a nice start if you're just kind of getting into grilling steaks and things like that. The New York strip is super forgiving. Again, nice steak, good quality cut of meat. It has nice marbling, less fat than the ribeye, but still a good quality steak all in all. From there, what we have is a filet mignon. Now, the filet mignon is actually a lean steak. The USDA does consider filet mignon to be lean. This is cut from the beef tenderloin, which is like a 12 to 14 pound piece of meat that's about like this. Now, the reason that a filet mignon is often so expensive is because we're going to start with a cut of meat that's about this big, and then we're going to start trimming all the fat off and trimming some of the other muscles away and everything like that. When we're left, what we get is maybe 6 to 8 of these little 8-ounce steaks. But to get to those steaks, you had to buy a piece that was about 14 pounds. So it takes a little bit to get to it. That's kind of what drives the price of a filet mignon up oftentimes. Now with that, again, this is one of the leaner cuts of meat. There is less fat content, marbling and things like that throughout this, far less than the ribeye, slightly less than the New York strip. Now the difference though is that this is the most tender cut of meat that you can buy. This should have like a buttery texture. When you grill this thing up, it will have a tendency to try and dry out. Now, when we get into cooking it, I'll talk about a couple other things that you can do. But a lot of times a filet mignon will do best with a pan sear as opposed to a grill. Now, if you are going to grill it, I often recommend with the filet mignon that you add fat to it. The way to do that is like a nice bacon wrap or something like that. Now, you'll also notice that the filet mignon sits up 2 inches, while everything else is approximately 1 inch to maybe 1.5 inches in thickness. So it will take longer. The other thing that you can do here is preheat your oven to about 425 degrees, start it on the grill, and then you'll finish it in the oven. Now lastly, what we have is a T-bone. A T-bone is a neat steak because what you're actually getting is 2 steaks in every one. Now this cut here is a little harder to tell, but what we actually have here is a New York strip which is this, and a little piece of filet mignon. Now, honestly, this isn't the best example of a T-bone that I've seen. A lot of times what you want to see is something like this, okay? But the larger section of your T-bone is actually New York strip. The smaller section is actually filet mignon, okay? So you're actually getting 2 steaks in one, which, while awesome, does present some challenges. Because the filet mignon is leaner, you will want that part to be on your lower heat, and the New York strip side of your T-bone to be under some higher heat. All right, so that's kind of the baseline differences between the fat contents that we're talking about, and kind of the makeup of what these steaks are. Now, the next thing we want to talk about anytime we're grilling steaks, salt and pepper. Well, S&P, baby. S&P, you need it. There's no such thing as grilling a steak without salt and pepper. If you believe that, you are wrong. I am sorry, but you are wrong. All right, now this is a mixture that I came up with a couple years back, and I kind of just keep at the ready. I'll be honest, I'll tell you, it is 1 part kosher, or 2 part kosher salt to 1 part coarse black pepper, 1 part granulated garlic, which basically means if I'm using 1 cup of kosher salt, I then have a 1/2 cup of black pepper and a 1/2 cup of granulated garlic. All right. Now, when you're seasoning steaks, it's important. This steak can take some salt, and it needs it. All right. It's not going to come off salty. What it's going to do is make that beef flavor sing, and that's what you're looking for. The right amount of salt always makes the food kind of sing. It pops right at the end. So that's what you're after. When we're seasoning steaks, we're going to, honestly, I season them pretty decently. And then rub that in. And then for good measure, hit it again, you know? Each one of these is going to take salt and pepper roughly the same way, okay? Don't be scared of the salt and pepper. You'll be just fine. But you do want to kind of rub it in so it adheres to the steak and you don't lose it on the grill, okay? Now, if you're really looking to get wild, you can toss one of these bad boys on there, right? Which is honestly just a waste of salt and pepper, but fun nonetheless. All right, so we're going to keep seasoning this up. All right, now we have all our seasoned steaks. Now, the other thing I'll say is these steaks have been setting out while I've been talking to you guys for a few minutes. It is always a good idea to let your steaks rest, just a little bit, so that you don't shock all the muscle fibers when you put it on the grill. All right, guys. So now what we're going to do is we're going to get these steaks onto the grill.